Hello, this is Matt on the Moon Lambo channel. Bank of America has filed a new patent citing Ripple technology, so I'm going to get into all the details on that as well as what that might mean in regards to XRP. Also, there's a piece from CoinDesk talking about R3 hiring a new individual to spread the good word of their Corda enterprise software, and I'm going to speak with you about what that means for XRP as well. It's all intertwined. Before we get going here, if you would please delicately tap that like button, and if you're a fan of Ripple and XRP, go ahead and subscribe. Do yourself a favor. Hope you all having a nice little Sunday here. Before we get going into the two topics that I cited, though, I do want to read this tweet from Anthony Pompliano because it got me thinking about something that I have expressed to you guys. What I'm about to tell you, if you've listened to me for more than like a few weeks, you might have heard what I'm about to say, but I want to tie it in to what Anthony Pompliano wrote here. Because when we talk about the staying power of cryptocurrencies, we talk about is because people are afraid. A lot of people are afraid, especially people from the outside that maybe have never really researched Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies. It seems like this big Ponzi scheme, this or that from the outside if you really don't know anything. And in terms of the use case of Bitcoin, originally positioned by Satoshi Nakamoto as a peer-to-peer cashless system, essentially, that's what it's getting at, decentralized, no central counterparty that can approve or deny transactions, all that good stuff. In terms of that being the use case, and that's what people see it as primarily. Well, if that's the use case, if that were the only one out there, that things becomes a little bit less certain as to whether or not that technology would actually be adopted if that's all it could do, because we're nowhere near actually seeing that. There's not reasonable usability. There are not custody solutions. Not everybody wants to hold their private keys. Not all people will want to hold their private keys ever. That's never going to happen. People feel differently about that. Some are super paranoid about others having access to it, and some just don't want to do it themselves. You just got to allow for different humans wanting different things. But I've brought up in the past, this is neat technology. It really is completely transformative to the global landscape of monetary policy. That's an understatement, but not purely because of that use case. And so I've posited my own reason that I believe cryptocurrencies have staying power. And it's different than what a lot of other people think. A lot of the Bitcoin maximalists, the people that are coming from ideological perspectives, are like, no, down with governments. They're not going to last. Fiat currencies are not going to. They're not going to have long-term staying power. This and that, and that's not the position that I'm coming from. I think in my lifetime, at least, the U.S. dollar, United States dollar, is probably always going to be here. I'm willing to bet. Could be wrong, but I'm highly confident that it is in fact going to be here. And I don't come from a stance of down with banks and down with government. I really don't. I think that banks are not, businesses are people. They're not just the brick and mortar that house the people that work there. Like the businesses are people. So I don't think banks are bad. I think they're by and large good. Most of them are small businesses. Most banks are small businesses helping their local community. And so as it pertains to like the use cases, the reason that I think cryptocurrencies are here to stay, it's completely different than what some people like that think. I think that cryptocurrencies are here to stay because you can create business models that are not capable of existing without distributed ledger technology, without cryptocurrencies. They cannot exist. And when you're talking about, in particular, the technology that is the XRP ledger and the fact that it has a native digital asset, which is XRP, you can absolutely run businesses that just previously, again, not possible of existing without that technology there. And so from my perspective, if somebody asks me, well, how are you confident that cryptocurrencies are going to have any sort of staying power? And I say, well, to me, there's no way that with this revolutionary technology that people will not value the digital assets monetarily at some price point. There's no way that there's no way that the market is not going to have a price for it that will have staying power. I mean, the price can change, but the fact that there will always be a price associated with it because it has staying power, it's nuts to me, the concept that that wouldn't happen. If this technology really can change the way in which money moves around the world. And if speculators like you and I know that businesses have to use a digital asset like XRP in order to run their businesses, why would there not eternally be a market rate associated with it that really has staying power? And so that's my answer. Why are cryptocurrencies here to stay? That's my answer. That's what I'm most certain about. Now, you could talk about that. Like I said, the other use case is a peer-to-peer cashless system. Maybe it's got some staying power. Maybe cryptocurrencies will be adopted in that capacity way down the road. We could be decades away from that for all I know. And maybe that will happen. But I'm more certain about this use case because you're talking about businesses need to adopt the technology, but the end user doesn't. So there's one less major hurdle there. Users don't have to start using cryptocurrency. It's all in the plumbing. So of course there's going to be a price associated with that thanks to speculators. That will never go away. And so I read this from Anthony Pompliano and it got me thinking along these lines. I was like, wow, he's kind of saying what I'm saying just in a different way. And so here's the tweet from Anthony Pompliano. And he wrote, "You can't value a network asset like Bitcoin with a financial asset valuation model." Ding, ding, ding. Okay, and he's got more of the tweet, but I want to stop right there. That absolutely true. I firmly believe that, and everything that I just stated about my belief, and that was my own original thought. I haven't heard anyone else state that the way that I stated it. That I think the reason it's here to stay is because businesses need digital assets, and as a result, individual speculators are going to see that, and they're going to put a price on it eternally. Like that's essentially my position on that. But that does mean that the valuation model is different. So when I read that from Anthony Pompliano, I was like, yes, yes, yes. And even though he's more of a Bitcoin maxi coming at it from a different point of view, that is absolutely true. And it's true for my belief as well. So anyway, his tweet continues though. "The value drivers are different. Bitcoin isn't driven by revenue, profits, GDP, interest rates, etc. The value is driven by network effects, both in users and security." Absolutely. I firmly believe that. And I know that he's not an XRP guy. I know he's a Bitcoin guy. But that everything that he wrote there, it's true from my stance as well. And I think that people are missing that. Gold bugs like Peter Schiff, he stated in a recent live stream that he had, he was taking questions from people on Bitcoin. He said that the biggest problem that he has is that he can't understand the underlying value. It hasn't been demonstrated to him. And to me, that is fundamental enough. If I didn't know what I knew about cryptocurrencies and I didn't understand the underlying value, I would have pretty much no confidence in this whatsoever. There is underlying value. And when I say value, I'm not talking about price. Price comes thanks to the marketplace because value is recognized. Value and price are very different here. And there's actual value in XRP specifically. And since I see that there is utility, I see that there is actual adoption, and the technology is absolutely superior to Bitcoin, for example. Doesn't mean I'm anti-Bitcoin, I'm not. But because I see all of these things, I am happy to put a reasonable amount of money in what is still technically a highly risky investment. But I am Mr. XRP bull, and I think that XRP is going to have staying power. I really do. So I just want to share with my thoughts on that. But let's go ahead and dive into the some of the XRP Ripple / Bank of America news right here, because this is fascinating. And so this is brand new right here. Actually, I first saw a tweet about this late last night, and so I haven't made a video about this yet. But it was from Dylan, @Dylan on Twitter. And it states, Bank of America patent just went public showing use of Ripple distributed ledger technology. And you can see here's a figure that was pulled from the actual patent that was filed here. And then these red boxes, you can see here's Ripple, distributed ledger technology / SGD. And let me go to the piece now, though, because I want to read some of this to you here. And this is from Cointelegraph, and it states, Bank of America files patent for settlement system citing Ripple. And so again, I'm going to read parts of this, and then I'm going to share with you big picture what it could mean relative to XRP specifically and its actual adoption. And so the piece begins. Bank of America has filed for a patent for settlement system citing the Ripple ledger, according to a filing on Google Patents. The patent in question, the application of which was published on June 6, describes a system using distributed ledger technology as an interbank communication tool. The proposed system would enable real-time settlement with transactions being communicated through a shared, decentralized ledger to which both the banks would have access. All right, fascinating. The decentralized network would both verify the identity of the payer and the payee and enable communication between the institutions. Notably, multiple illustrations include the patent explicitly cite Ripple DLT. Ripple's base asset and proposed settlement gateway asset XRP is not mentioned in the patent. Okay, so when I'm reading through this, and this is again what I just switched to now on the screen, this is just one of the images resulting from the patent. Okay, so XRP is not cited in this particular patent. Fine. So then you look at the distributed ledger technology, which is Ripple DLT, that's distributed ledger technology, which is blockchain, and that's not specifically referencing XRP. So there's a couple things. It's X current or it's X rapid, and XRP just isn't cited. It's presumably one of the other. Either that or Ripple's got some technology we're unaware of, because I don't think this is XVIA. I don't believe it's XVIA. There's no reason to believe that. So it's got to be one or the other, right? Because again, it is one or the other, or there's some other technology that we're just unaware of. So even if this is not X rapid, even if it were just X current, getting the rail set is absolutely paramount, especially in these early days as it comes to adoption of Ripple technology. And so I've always been kind of skeptical of larger banks, just the concept of larger banks being among the first to jump on board and start using XRP to settle. And one of the primary reasons for that is the largest banks out there, they have so much liquidity. They have Nostro accounts all over the world. And their smaller competitors, the smaller banks, pay to tap into that liquidity. So it's actually a money source. So even though there's this dormant capital around the world, and yes, it can be better used, I do believe that, the smaller banks, they don't have a choice right now, right? So they're just paying. But that's part of the reason that I think that the larger banks are going to be. It was just a theory that larger banks would be some of the later ones to jump in. It's like, oh, we're not really making as much money from our dormant capital laying around the world. We're not able to charge our smaller competitors fees because they're going around us, they're circumventing us, and they're just using XRapid because you don't need a bunch of intermediaries anymore to conduct these transactions. That's once the network gets built out, which could take some time, of course. And so I thought, well, banks like Citi, because I've heard Ripple employees like Ashish Burla talk about, like Citi, for example, they stopped in the short term going after Citibank, for example, because they're too big, and it became clear that's not the right target for them right now. But it could be in the future. It's just not right now. And so, as far as Bank of America, I started thinking, XRP and Bank of America, does that make sense for them? What's their Nostro Vostro situation the world over? And so it got me thinking along those lines. But even in instances where they don't have corridors built out, even if you're Bank of America, because I'm not saying they certainly don't have every corridor dominant. Even the largest banks don't have every corridor. There are exotic corridors out there where you just have to have intermediaries. No matter what you do, there are all sorts of those. Even the largest entities in the world have not found a way around that. It doesn't exist, and that's why there's a chain of bilateral relationships in between it as far as banks, financial institutions. And so the truth is, regardless of whether or not my theory pans out as far as big banks jumping on board with XRP first or not, regardless, I started thinking more about just the technology being adopted in general, not just by Bank of America, but by other banks at large, and how multi-hop is going to change everything as more corridors are developed, even outside of the larger banks, even outside of them. So if this technology is just some sort of interesting twist on the link-up of Ripple's, so even if we're just X-current, if that's what this patent is about, there's something different about it, because if it were purely the adoption of X-current or X-rapid, there would be no need specifically for Bank of America to file a patent which happens to include Ripple. And so you can sit here and stare at this all day long, and the answer isn't going to just pop out at us. But there's something else to this. It doesn't have anything to do with settling with a different coin or anything like that, certainly, and it doesn't cite XRP. So again, all that I can glean from this is that it syncs up somehow with existing Ripple technology. That's the most that we can get out of it. And so if they're pairing up with that, and if somehow it actually did involve Ripple's XRapid technology, well, you know what that would mean. You're talking about the opening of all sorts of corridors. Now, I say all sorts of corridors, but it's more like anyone else outside of Bank of America's network, because I'm sure they've got all sorts of payment corridors open with their Nostro Vostro accounts. That would be a reasonable assumption, I think. But if you're a smaller bank, it's more like in your overseas, whatever, and you see that Bank of America now opened up with XRapid. It's more like look at all of the endpoints from the Bank of America side. If you're one small bank, like a really genuinely small business bank, you can now if XRapid is live on both ends, you can now link up to any of those points, right? And you as long as there's liquidity in between, there's the question of exchanges in individual countries, so that has to happen too. But as long as you've got those pieces, you can do it. And so that's why the network effect is more valuable the more entities come on board. But with Bank of America, if they were one of the earlier ones on board, yes, they have all these endpoints. But then, first of all, are there mechanisms for liquidity to be transferred in place? So I'm talking about, of course, exchanges specifically that are paired up with XRP. And then even if so, what are the financial institutions and banks at the other end that Bank of America could actually link up with? Because these train tracks have to be laid, essentially, with the software. That's what it is. And so the network effect, like the positive results that a huge bank would see, I'm not completely convinced that they'd initially want to jump on board when there's not a substantial network effect, specifically with XRapid yet. It's growing every day, and we're seeing word from Ripple, the employees, of course, that there's always more businesses jumping on board with XCurrent and XRapid. But I think it's going to take time before this is just a long way of me saying I think it's going to take time before you see larger banks jump on board specifically with XRP. But regardless, whatever this patent means, and it is cryptic, and they're not going to come right out and tell us exactly what this is, okay, fine. But I believe that they're using existing Ripple technology because, like I said, the only alternative is Ripple made technology that we're unaware of, but it is Ripple distributed ledger technology. There you are. So there we have it. But you can tell me what you think below. But nonetheless, this is an interesting development. And we already knew that there was a connection between Ripple and Bank of America going back some time. It's just, this is the biggest development I've seen between Ripple and Bank of America in I don't even know how long. I don't know if it's been years or something like. It's been a long time. It's off the top of my head. It's been a long time since I've seen anything new having to do with Ripple and Bank of America. So that's fascinating. All right, now another piece, last piece that I wanted to cover in this particular video here. This is from CoinDesk. This is titled R3 Taps Software Sales Vet to Evangelize Paid Version of Corda. All right, so let me read some of this here for you. Blockchain technology company R3 has hired software sales veteran Kathy Minter as Chief Revenue Officer, a role newly created to recruit users for the firm's paid commercial product, Corda Enterprise. Minter, who lived through the revolution in cloud computing from its early days, sounded unfazed by reports this week stating the blockchain, not Bitcoin, segment of the industry, which R3 was once personified, can expect to see as much as a 60% decrease in the in investment flows this year. Okay. By the way, I want to point this out too, and I'm going to get into how this links up with XRP, right? But I want to state this real quick. Where was the piece that I just read that I wanted to highlight? Oh yeah, here we go. She sounded unfazed by reports this week stating the blockchain, not Bitcoin segment of the industry. All right. Okay. So I want to point out here, as it pertains to the Corda network, which is blockchain technology, smart contract platform, there is no native digital asset. So you can have blockchains, legitimately valuable blockchains, without a native digital asset. So to me, that's once I learned about that way back, before even before R3 got in their litigation with Ripple about the whole XRP, and I'm not going to get into that in this video, but even before the litigation between R3 and Ripple, when reading about them, I was like, okay, so they have actual blockchain software for smart contracts, and there's no native digital asset. So I thought, okay, well, they're trying to do something that doesn't seem scammy to me because it doesn't seem to be a money grab. Because when I think of new smart contract platforms coming out, especially around 2017, those were ICOs and they were pretty much money grabs. And I'm sure that most of them are not going to exist long term. Not surprising here. So I just want to point out the whole blockchain, not Bitcoin thing. People are not wrong. To say that you have to have a native digital asset, I think misses the bigger picture, because we're talking about a world in which, yes, you need smart contract platforms that work, but as long as everything's interoperable, then everything's hunky-dory. There's no problem. Because look, there's separate software, the Corda Settler, which I'm going to get into in a sec, that utilizes XRP. So let me read a little bit further first, and then I'll jump into that a little bit. But here's a quote from Kathy Minter, just hired by R3 to kind of push the Corda Enterprise. She said, "I'm seeing huge demand for that at R3, so I'm not concerned. Maybe some of our competitors should be concerned," right? And then the piece continues, "There are many projects graduating from the proof of concept to pilot stage that demonstrate the cost-saving potential of blockchain," Minter said, adding that R3 will be working to build specific return on investment analysis for customers. And here's a quote. "I remember cloud computing in its early nascent days, having conversations with customers around bringing data to the cloud. They would kind of look at you and say they would never move data out of a data center to the cloud," she said. Now I'm at R3, I find similar feelings around blockchain. It's about education and evangelizing. So she is spreading the good word. Right. Minter has spent close to 30 years in enterprise software in forms like SAP, Oracle, and Docker. Since joining R3, she sees the firm's vibrant open source community as a natural place to convert users to the commercial version. And here's a quote from her now. Open source users are fabulous targets for us to talk to about taking them to the next level. Naturally, the enterprise version comes into play as you talk about solving business problems, right? Perfect, exactly. And so I'm going to read a little bit more in just a sec, but here's an important point that I want to make, and here's why I want to see. I'm really encouraged when I see developments like this, and then the direction that a company like R3 is going, because they are directly building on top of the XRP ledger with the Corda settler. That would be certainly fair to say, because XRP is the first and only digital asset that the only cryptocurrency that you can use for settlement with Corda settler. That's the first and only to start. There can be others in the future, but I don't know why others would want to necessarily settle with other cryptocurrencies if they're slower and more costly and this and that. So, and then there's the issue of liquidity. You have to have actual liquidity. And given that the nature of where things are at with smart contracts and everything, maybe even though there's not much liquidity in the crypto world, there really isn't relative to other asset classes, maybe it's enough to get things going. Maybe it's going to be okay right now, because I think that as it becomes increasingly clear that there's a need for liquidity, that will spur confidence in speculators and institutional investors, and then you'll have more opportunity there to complete larger transactions, of course. It's all about liquidity. Now, price matters for these assets, don't get me wrong, but liquidity is actually even more important for XRP in terms of utility. Now, if you're a speculator, you're probably like, well, I care about price more. Okay, fair point. That's a fair point. But I'm just saying, for actual utility, that if you want to get more transactions out there, liquidity is actually more important than price. So, but let me read a little bit further here. The Corda open source community has burgeoned in the last year or so, with enterprises experimenting with the code and an ecosystem of core dApps enjoying a life of its own. Opting for the Corda Enterprise version brings the added perks of 24-hour support 5 days a week, predictable release schedules, high availability, and support for industry-standard enterprise databases, said R3 Managing Director Charlie Cooper. And here's a quote now. It includes the world's only blockchain application firewall, which enables the platform to be deployed inside corporate data centers and is optimized for use within these highly demanding IT environments, claimed Cooper. Last year, R3 CEO David Rutter said the company set revenue targets for 2018 of around $20 million, and that the firm had missed its target by around 10%. Well, at least it's not that far off. At least it's not like 80% off. Okay. But as far as the year goes, Cooper said it's not company policy to discuss revenue targets and commercial goals, but added, our revenues are increasing year on year, definitely, and we also have a very strong capital base, which will fund our growth and provide runway for many years, and we have ceased all fundraising. Well, that's positive. We have over 200 staff now and are bringing on several more people every week. And that's good to hear. I remember reading an article, and I think it was summer of 2018, and there were some disgruntled R3 employees that had left, and they were spreading a lot of rumors, a lot of juicy gossip about how R3 was about to run out of money and just completely go out of business, and they were saying that if things didn't change, they would have run out of funds by, I think, if I'm not mistaken, timeline-wise, I think it was January of 2019, and they're still here, obviously, so that's cool. But they also settled with Ripple in the meantime, and I think they got a bunch of XRP. So maybe that's part of the reason, too, that helped with their funding. Now they don't... and that's assuming the gossip was true in the first place, of course, which I never saw anybody independently confirm, okay, yeah, that's actually what's going on here. But, there's that. But this is all super good for XRP, because the bottom line is, as Corda Enterprise software, which is smart contracts, is as assuming that they find success with their business model, and let's assume that it's 5 or 10 years down the road, and everything magically pans out the way they want. There are all sorts of business entities using Corda Enterprise software, the Corda network, for smart contracts. That presents an excellent opportunity for XRP, which presumably would be much more liquid and probably a lot more valuable by then, one would think anyway, to actually help with the settlement, because there are certain smart contracts that are going to require monetary payouts one way or another for one or more parties. And XRP can be the bridge in between for some, because some of those you will need a bridge. Not all of them, but some of them. You look at it like this: there are smart contracts where there's no payout. There are smart contracts where there's a payout, but it's not between from one fiat currency to another. So maybe you don't necessarily need XRP. Unless people want to settle and actually receive XRP. And then there's another where there could be payouts, and maybe there are parties in different countries where if you need to settle, you do need XRP as a bridge currency to convert from one fiat to another. And so that's where the opportunity is. So the more of these smart contracts you see, a certain percentage of them, even if it's a small percent-wise, are going to need settlement, and a certain amount of that will flow through to XRP, and that's just one use case. That's on top of what Ripple's doing. And so what this does is it will affect supply and demand, because businesses will need to be in place. They'll need to actually own XRP to make money off of the buying and selling of the XRP as a bridge currency. And as that happens, of course, more XRP has to be pulled out of the buying, it has to be like purchased from somewhere and then held ultimately. And of course, there's the buying and selling of it. But if you're like a market maker, for example, yes, you're selling it, but then you're buying it right back, or else you can't conduct business anymore. So there you are with that. But that's all I got for you in this video. I am not a financial advisor. Do not buy or sell anything because of anything that I say or write. That would be a very, very, very bad idea. Until next time, to the moon, Lambo!